Hi, everyone. This is Sister Elizabeth, and you are listening to In the Company of Charity, the podcast of the Daughters of Charity. As you know, I'm not alone. I'm here with Sister Liz Sjoberg. Sister Liz, how are you doing today?
I'm feeling great, and we are into Advent and just trucking right along in these first days. So just doing great. Thanks for asking.
That's great. I'm so glad to hear that. And I know that you've been away. You were away for a little while on a trip that was evangelically exciting with a bunch of youths.
We
So
went
tell
with the
us a little bit
youths.
about where you've been.
Me and 16,000 of my closest friends descended on Indianapolis, Indiana, for National Catholic Youth Conference, better known as NCYC. And it was madness, and it was amazing, and it was crazy all at the same time. But what a sign of hope for the world! These kids who are full of faith and full of joy, and had many crazy hats, which I was warned about. But I it was a sight to behold. All of the hat exchanges that were happening. We were right across from the karaoke stage in the thing, and so I can't even tell you how many times I heard Justin Bieber and some other, K-pop demon hunters and things that I had no clue about, but now I know slightly more than I did before.
So did you get up there, do your own
I it
karaoke?
was
I mean, you
I
actually could do it, because you can sing.
I was tempted. However, there were long lines of people signed up for doing this, so I let the kids have their day, and we were quite busy, so it was okay. We had a great time. Saw lots of cool people, including Pope Leo the 14th. So
Yes, that is so
it
cool.
was
Now, of
awesome.
course, not in person, but this is the man. He is zooming and featuring in every place. He shows up at ball games and meetings and
What a
gatherings,
guy!
and yeah, just have screen. He will show up, man. It's amazing.
And I will say, to hear the Pope speak in your own native language, there's nothing like it. It is really cool. And for all of us English speaking Americans, it's really cool to see that. Our Pope, from Chicago.
Yeah, it's amazing. It is amazing. Well, I while you were evangelizing young people, I was spending a little bit of time with one of the younger members of our province, sister who's just 6 years vocation, who was making her vows for the first time. And as many of our listeners know,
Yes.
Daughters of Charity don't make perpetual or solemn vows. We make annual vows, private vows. And so this was the time she would take her vows for the first time, and ironically, she will renew them. She took them now. She'll renew them on March 25th. So, not quite the full year that we normally have, but she'll renew them then. And it's a really, really exciting time for the whole province, for the whole company of the Daughters
Mm,
of Charity, um, when our youngest members are such a sign of hope for us. And when they make that confirmation of their commitment and their saying yes to a life of service to the poor through the evangelical councils, it's just really, it gives all of us a boost. So maybe some of the young people you met will one day make vows for the first time as a daughter of charity. Just putting
hey,
it out there. Anyone
God
thinking about it?
willing.
Anyone? It's a very exciting life. We love it.
Yes, we are blessed,
Yeah.
and it just gives us a little shot in the arm, as will this interview, which you guys are about to listen to. I'm a little partial because Sister Cecilia lives in our house and is so delightful. But maybe your reactions, your thoughts as we head
Yeah.
into the.
So you spoke with Sister Cecilia West, who does live with you now, and as I was listening, she's very soft spoken, and very calming voice, and I thought to myself, this sister is like kindness personified. As you hear her story, you'll just hear the ways in which she just responded with a gift of kindness and a gift of love and the ability to see the good in what was sometimes difficult situations for her. Um,
Mm,
and bravery personified. I mean, she just said yes when she always had everything in her, wanted
What
to
is
say
that?
no, but she said yes. And again, just a great time for us, I think, especially during Advent, that we're moving out of that place of darkness into the light and saying yes to the child born, to the Christ incarnated, to the continuation, of our lives of faith and compassion and kindness and empathy, all the things. She just takes it all. It was great.
Yes.
So I really, really enjoyed it, and I hope our listeners do too.
It's a real meditation, and you can listen for the times that she is reflecting on how God is in her experiences with the poor and how he's speaking to her in those encounters. And so that's an invitation to us to do the same. And we'll pray for you guys during your Advent. May it be a fruitful time. We have one more episode before Christmas, and we're just excited to share this testimony, story of vocation and hope with you. Our prayers are with you. God bless you guys. Okay, welcome back to the podcast, everybody. This is Sister Liz, and I'm here with a good friend and a sister that I live with in community, Sister Cecilia West. And we're so grateful that you took the time today. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Happy to be here.
So we will start with, who you are, where you're from, and how you met the Daughters of Charity.
Good question, because it was rather complicated, because I really didn't meet too many Daughters of Charity. I was mainly told about the Daughters of Charity. I grew up in a little town in Mississippi called Walls. It's close to Memphis. So I did have a little bit of big town experience, but my experiences were mainly in this little town. And I think it was through some people in Memphis that my brother knew who first told me about the Daughters of Charity. Also, when I was in the 3rd grade, I was confirmed, and I chose Louise as my confirmation name. And Louise DeMariac is one of the co-founders of our community, the Daughters of Charity. So I had to do a little report. So in 3rd grade language, I wrote a paragraph about Louise DeMariac. And the one thing I remember was that, again, it was they serve the poor. In this little town, there were a group of priests, priest of the Sacred Heart, and their charism was also service of the poor. And they helped my family a lot at times when we were in some dire straits. And one of the things they did for me was they invited me to work at their rectory when I was in high school. And from that, my tuition was paid so that I could go to an out-of-state Catholic high school that wasn't too far away. And I learned a lot about the priest from working at the rectory. I did cleaning, I cooked, I typed the bulletin, I answered the phones. My favorite part was cooking for them, because there was usually about 5 men around. And they were always very appreciative no matter what I cooked. And I was just learning to cook, but it gave me a lot of confidence. And because of my attraction to their service of the poor, and I could not be a priest of the Sacred Heart, I wanted to be a sister. So I had to do some remembering of stories that I'd heard about the daughters. And also, when I went to visit one of these priests, who was a very good friend of mine in San Antonio, he took me to a parish mission church outside of San Antonio. And there were 5 Daughters of Charity at the parish visiting. And I asked him, what kind of sisters were they? And he said, Daughters of Charity. And it got me thinking and praying. And so I finally sat down and wrote this community, and I was impressed because I didn't get tons of pamphlets like I had gotten from a couple of other communities. I got a handwritten letter, and that meant so much to me. Yeah, and then it just kind of flowed. We started communicating. I met the sisters. I met one sister at the airport in Memphis when she was traveling through. At one point, it was before we did pre-postulancy and spending time with the sisters for a long period of time. But Sister Elise, our provincial, knew that I had a lot of experience with priests, but not a lot of experience with sisters. And she wanted me to know, hey, there is a difference between the lifestyle.
Just slightly.
Yes,
Just slightly.
between the lifestyle of the priest and the sisters. And so she invited me to Nashville to spend several weeks with the sisters there. And that was really my first time of actually rubbing shoulders with the sisters, the daughters. And I really enjoyed my time. I learned. They brought me to their missions where they worked. And I knew I wanted to serve the poor in a very special way, but I also knew that I didn't want to teach school. And there was no one in this house that taught school. They were social workers. They worked in the hospital. They were nurses. They were administrators of the hospital, but no one taught school. And that was a real plus for me, which I will get into later. So that's how I got introduced to the daughters. I loved what I saw, and I asked to apply.
So you mentioned that none of the sisters that you had met were teachers. It is ironic and hysterical because you spent many years teaching little kids.
Yes, I did. I have learned from my experience in community that the sisters can pick up on gifts that we don't even know we have. And when I was in our seminary, our novitiate, I was sent to a daycare center to work once a week. And it was difficult for me at first, but I began to like it. But I didn't talk about liking it because I didn't want to be a teacher. And so, and anyway, with the little kids at the daycare center, I was playing with them. I wasn't teaching them. I was just helping the teacher. And I got to take them outside for recess. I got to play with them with their games. I was teaching and I didn't know I was teaching. And anyway, when it was time for my first mission, I was sent to St. Christine's School in Youngstown, Ohio, to be a teacher aide. I was shocked. I was sad. I was afraid. But I went, knowing that that's what I was asked to do. And I got to work with the first graders and second graders. I got to do some actual teaching of small groups. I had a little place to teach under the stairwell in the school hall. That was my first place that I actually taught children by myself. Mm. And I just kind of fell in love with it. And 3 years in, I said, I want my own classroom. So that's how I got into teaching in the Daughters of Charity.
How many years were you teaching those little ones?
I taught preschool 3 and 4 year olds and some kindergarten for 24 years.
Wow.
And I loved it. And I taught children who were very needy and didn't have many experiences. And it was my responsibility to expose these children to as much as I could to help them learn how to read, to learn how to do math, to learn how to do all the things that little children have to learn to do before they go to school. And I always made it fun because I wanted to have fun too. And we just had great times together. I made my classroom as nice as I could. I gave it a homey atmosphere because so many of my children that I taught didn't come from places that were very comfortable or that had room for them. And usually it was the preschoolers who didn't have room. At one point, I was in the projects in Chicago and I went to vote. And I was probably the only white face in this building where people were voting. And someone came up to me and said, "Ma'am, you don't belong here." And I said, "Yeah, this is where I'm supposed to vote." And someone else came up and said, "No, you don't belong here." And then one of the ladies, who was a mother of some of the children I had taught, came by and she heard me trying to fit into this voting area. And she said, "This is Sister Cecilia. She has raised half the children in this projects. Leave her alone. She belongs here." And I think that was one of the most touching moments I had with a parent when I was working in the projects in Chicago. First, she said I belonged, and secondly, she said that I had helped raise the children, and that meant so much to me. And because I taught 3 and 4 year olds, some of the children I did have for 2 years, and I did feel like I was helping to raise them. And I enjoyed that a lot. And I learned early on that when they left my classroom every day, that I would say goodbye to them as if I would not see them tomorrow, because that happened. And that was extremely sad for me. So I just made sure that I looked them in the eyes, I said goodbye, and they went on their way.
It is something that I think sisters in particular maybe struggle with at times, right? The idea that we have to be in people's lives and invest and do the work that we're asked to do, but also have the I don't know what you would call it, like boundaries or a healthy detachment in a way to be able to let people go.
That's right.
Knowing that we just have to make the most of the time that we have. And given the fact now that you're working at the hospital, you probably see that even more so.
Yes,
in
I do.
The number of days or moments that you have with people.
None of my ministries have ever been long-term. I have gotten used to not knowing the end of the story. But I hope that when heaven comes, it's not that I need to see the fruits of my labors, but I hope to see the joy on their faces, to know that they are part of God's family, and these are God's children, and God will celebrate what they have become, and I will want to share in that.
Mm. So you did that for 25 years. So whatever possessed you, or maybe it was a thought of the community to go into the counseling side of things?
I had to end my time in preschool because I physically got to the point that I could not keep up with the little ones. Um, I had some knee troubles, and I had some different little things that just made it harder for me to get up and do the fun things that I had been doing with the children. And because of that, I asked the community. I told them first that I felt that I had aged out of preschool teaching. And
I never aged in, by the way, to even age out. I was already too aged out for them.
So anyway, I aged out, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And because of circumstances, they asked me to stay on one more year, and I did. And at the end of that year, I had no clue what to do. And I told them that. I said, I don't know what to do. I have spent all these years with little ones. I've worked with parents, but never in the way that I worked with the children. And I knew I needed some guidance for what comes next. And there were two sisters on our council at the time that worked with our provincial, and both of them were hospital sisters. And both of them talked to me individually about the possibility of doing hospital work. I was afraid that they would put me at a desk, at the reception desk at the front door of the hospital, to answer phones and tell people where to go, because I felt that was probably the only talent I had left to use for hospital. And but they surprised me with an offer to do an internship at a hospital in Chicago, two hospitals in Chicago. And they gave me 6 months, and they worked with the administration of the hospitals, and I did a month with guest relations, I did a month with chaplaincy, I did a month with mentally ill patients. Anyway, I had this whole thing planned out, and I was supposed to experiment my way through the hospital. And there was a chapel close by when I walked into the hospital. And every day when I walked into the hospital, I went into that chapel and I said, very quickly, I just said, God, I don't know what you want me to do, but I will do anything I'm asked to do today. And I was asked to do a lot of strange things, a lot of following people. I remember one of my first thing in guest relations was a man who the doctor had accidentally left a sponge in his abdomen. Oh, and he was very upset with the hospital. And they thought that possibly sister talking to him would help. And so, since I was in that role right then, they did ask me to go talk to him. I went very scared, but I found out that he responded to my presence and I am a calm person, and he responded to that, and he toned down a little bit. And by the end of the conversation, I was amazed that his whole tone, his affect changed. And I think I learned then that I don't know how to say this, but being a sister made a difference in how I could work and pray and be present to this man that touched him where some of the other hospital employees weren't able to do it. And I think, when I taught preschool, the kids loved me, but they would have loved anybody in the room that was showing care to them. They didn't, the 3 and 4-year-olds, they just know you have a funny name like Sister Cecilia. But adults know that there's something else there. And anyway, I thought, well, maybe there is a place for a sister in the hospital. And then it was time to work with the mentally ill on a locked unit within the hospital. And I fell in love with it. I could talk to the patients. I could get into their hallucinations. I could play. I could tease. I could take serious. I could calm. I felt very at ease. There were some behaviors that should have scared me that didn't. And I was cussed out a few times, and I was called names, and for some reason, I was able to go beyond that to know that this is a very sick person and I need to respond differently. I can't respond in kind. I have to respond with kindness. And one day I was walking with one of the men in the locked unit, and he was telling me all kinds of things about his life. What was true and what wasn't true, I have no idea. But he told me this great big story. And after I walked up and down the halls with him for a while, he stopped and he looked at me, and in a very normal voice, not his sick voice, but a very normal voice, he said to me, "Cecilia, you're good at this." And it was like a message from God, that you're doing okay. You're reaching, you don't have to struggle so much in this position. It felt natural. And they started sending me out of that locked unit to the emergency room to work with the mentally ill patients when they first come in. And that's when they're at their worst, because they're usually not medicated. They're very upset. They're very angry because they've been forced to come. And I found that I could be a quiet, healing presence when everybody around them was all upset and trying to do something medically to help this person. I didn't have to do that. I could hold a hand. I could talk to them in a quiet voice. I didn't have to shout anything to them. And I felt like there was a place for me in this emergency situation. And there was a lot of chaos, but I could deal with it. And so when my 6 months were up, I decided that I wanted to go further in my education to work with the mentally ill. And I discerned that being a counselor would give me that opportunity. I did not want to be a counselor that would do something long term with patients. I wanted to do crisis counseling. And so I asked the community if I could do that. And they said yes. And I went to Loyola in Chicago to get my master's in counseling. But the hospital wanted to hire me and to work on the locked unit. So I learned to be a tech on a locked unit in a psych ward. And everything I was learning at school, I saw pass before me on the unit. It was like a living learning, and it was great. And it made my counseling school so much more real. And it confirmed in me that I wanted to do crisis work. And I graduated, and these same two sisters were still on the council, and they knew that in Indianapolis, one of the Ascension hospitals was opening up a trauma unit in their ER. And they helped me to apply. And I got the job to work with the mentally ill patients and the trauma patients that came in, whether they were traumatized or their family was. There was a lot of emotion. And that was the beginning of my daily work in the ER. And one night when I was working, one of the doctors said to me, "Sister, where did you learn to do what you're doing?" And I said, "I taught preschool for 24 years.
Of course.
And he laughed. But it was true. There was so much I was learning from that I could pull on from my work with the children. And I did not have a chaotic classroom. I don't want to give you this picture. But there were times when we got into the activities that everything was kind of up for grabs, and we were having a great time and making messes. And I knew we would clean them all up. I knew we would be back to normal, but I allowed the children to do that. And these were just big people coming in, making messes and shooting out verbal messes and all kinds of things. And it worked. And I mean, my kids used to work, they had vivid imaginations. My mentally ill patients had hallucinations. It worked.
Human nature.
Yes, it did work. And I remember one night I had a lot of family members in the family waiting room because someone had gotten shot. And there was like 40 people in there, and they were all talking and yelling. And I needed to say something to them, and I couldn't get their attention. So I just turned off the lights. And they stopped talking, and I turned the lights right back on. But it was
that is a kindergarten teacher move.
Yes. And it worked. And so, I don't know, I just found there was just a lot of similarities, and I needed to have a lot of patience. And I had a lot of patience with my preschoolers, and that carried over also. And I don't know, I had 14 years in trauma and working with the mentally ill patients in the emergency room. And that was a blessing in so many ways. And I kind of aged out of working in the emergency room too. It got to be, I couldn't respond as fast as I needed to. And that's pretty difficult when you're working with trauma. You need to be able to get there to deal with what they want you to do. Because usually in the trauma room, I was the only person that didn't have a medical reason to be there. I had some freedom. And people would be yelling out to me, "Sister, go get, sister, go take care of, sister, get the history from the family." and I knew I had to move quickly. So I did kind of age out of that too. And so when I came to my experience here at St. Agnes Hospital in Baltimore, I knew that I didn't want to spend my whole time in the emergency room. So I was asked to work with psychiatry, and I see patients for counseling, especially our patients who are waiting to get a bed in a treatment center, which is very difficult in our world today. And they have to spend long time waiting either in the hospital or in the emergency room. So I spend time with them on a daily basis and give them the opportunity to have some counseling and to hopefully keep them a little bit calmer and treat them like a person, like they're not treated on the streets. And most of our mentally ill patients come to us from the streets in Baltimore.
It just strikes me. We kind of live and breathe this stuff of an incarnational spirituality of how God speaks to us. Yeah, not just in the chapel or at mass. That those things are great. And God can speak to us in all kinds of ways through the events and the people that we meet. And it just is so fascinating to me in your stories of how you just point out each time of God using these examples and people to speak to something inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we're not careful, we can miss it.
Yeah. And it really comes in very quiet ways. Like that man who said, "You're really good at this." He never said another word to me about anything like that. And his voice was different. And I think that's what tuned me in to really hearing him. And once I had a little girl that I was walking with, and I was holding her hand, and she said to me, "Sister, what are you going to be when you grow up?" And I said,
I'm still not sure.
I said, "No." I said, "I think I want to be a teacher." And she said, "You would be good at that." So I don't know. God spoke to me in a lot of different ways because I have a tendency to think that I'm not enough and I'm not good enough. And God needs talents that are so much bigger than me. And I have learned through my ministry, both with the little ones and with working with the mentally ill, that God can use all kinds of people. And I might not remember exactly what therapeutic modality I'm using, but I know I'm listening. I know I'm caring. I know that I can talk heart to heart. And in reality, and listen heart to heart. That's what counseling is. It's not in, well, modalities and types of counseling has its place. I'm not saying that. But when I'm down and dirty and into something, it's my heart. It's not my book knowledge. And that's a gift from God. I know it is. And I'm grateful. And God made my little gifts bigger.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I'd be interested for you to talk about is in this the situation that you're in at the hospital, where so many homeless who don't have resources, who've been maybe estranged from family or any kind of support system, it could feel like you're doing just a drop in the bucket of what kind of difference can you even make when this person maybe get some days of treatment in a facility, but might just end up back on the street. And I think, if you watch too much news, you can kind of get that overwhelming sense of, what does it even matter? Everything's like going to hell in a handbasket anyway. So like, what do you do with that of, am I really making a difference in this, when everything is so complicated and you're just touching one little piece of it? How do you stay energized, or how do you not fall into despair with all of that?
I think in our Vincentian world, we're taught to love the people we serve and who we work with. There is the God in me meets the God in you. And I really believe that even the shortest amount of actual loving presence can make a difference in someone's life. And I know that many of the people that I work with will end up back on the streets. But I also know from seeing them possibly again in the hospital, they remember they were loved at one point for one period, little short period of time. And I think that that's our charism, that we're given that, we're not, I can't make the big changes. I'm not a social worker. The social workers work very hard at finding a shelter, finding a place for this person to go, find housing, get the person reunited with their families. Treatment centers do that. My role is to say to a person, and maybe not with words, but to say, I care about you. I see good in you. I want you to know that you're a child of God. And you remind me that I am a child of God. And there's nothing like being totally cussed out by someone and walking out of the room 45 minutes later or so with a person saying, you'll come back to see me tomorrow, won't you? And that's the way it is. Some days. Other days, it's you hit it off right away with someone. But there is that sense of no matter what you say or do, you are a good person. And I want you to know that. And I try to share that. Yeah. And I know from my own background that intermittent caring by others has made a huge difference in my life. I remember a lot of people who have shown me that I am lovable, that I am cared about. And I know it helps others.
So in closing, what advice would you give to somebody who maybe felt like you did at one point of, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm just here. I don't have all the gifts. Maybe they don't feel like they're good enough, or that they have the right skills for whatever God is calling them to do. What is your encouragement for them?
I would say, go to God. Talk to God. Say these fears out loud to God. Say them to people that you love. Let other people reflect back to you your gifts. Because usually we're the last person to know what we actually can do in God's world, and or the last person to recognize what we have in us. Talk, like I said, talk to people, ask them, what do you see as my gift? I had one of the retired sisters a few weeks ago. I was visiting with her, and she said to me, "Why do you like me so much?" And it was a wonderful opportunity to tell her how in very little ways she has touched my life. You know, I said, "Remember that time you came to Washington and you were spending the night at our house and you saw me by myself, sitting, probably looking anxious, and you came over to me and said, 'How are you doing?' I said, 'I didn't know you, but you asked me, 'How are you doing?' And I just think that other people can teach us a lot about ourselves, and not to forget that God can teach us through other people what we can do and what we are capable of. I am a poor daughter of a carpenter from Walls, Mississippi, who never dreamed of being able or wanting to go to college, never dreamed or wanting to be a teacher. Never in my wildest dreams would I have thought I can work in a hospital, I can talk to doctors, I can make treatment plans, I can make a difference in this room at this time, and I can do it. But it was a lot of soul searching. It was a lot of mistakes. It was a lot of hard knocks. And it was a lot of people loving me through all that got me here.
What a great way to end. Thank you so much, Sister
Thank
Seal.
you.
You're the best.
Thank you.